Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Canny Commuting, the series that makes it easier for people to walk, cycle, and wheel to get to work and for work, and also public transport, he says, because that's really important today. My name is Andy, and I am your Canny Commuter in Chief, and this is the Canny Commuting Kitchen, where I am allowed to broadcast all of our episodes from. Canny Commuting is brought to you by My Journey Hampshire in association with Sustrans and is funded by National Highways. All of our back episodes are available at bit.ly/canny episodes, he says from memory. Episode 15 is about getting to hard to reach places. Now, I have a very kind of personal relationship with this because I grew up in a village in the West Midlands where during the day there was one bus an hour, but as soon as you got outside of the middle of the day, getting out of our village by any means other than car was a real challenge. So finding ways of getting to places without using a car where there aren't ready public transport links is something that I think is really important and is a big enabler. So today we are going to be talking about how you get to those hard to reach places. But it's not just about me and my personal experiences and railing about being a teenager who can't get into town for a night out. We've got three amazing contributors here with us today who've got really quite different sets of experiences and different skills they want to bring to bear on this. So I'm going to start by introducing, and I'm going to say old friend, but the emphasis is very much on friend. Anna, would you like to introduce yourselves to us and tell us about who you are and why you are here today and what your experience of getting to hard to reach places is?
Lovely. So yeah, my name is Anna and I work for Sustrans. I don't own a car. I have one that I can borrow if I need it, but it is my last resort. So for any journeys I'm making, I typically try to look at using public transport or walking or cycling. And my hard to reach journeys have tended to be journeys that I have to make for work. So my commute at the moment isn't necessarily hard to reach, but throughout my career I've had to do a reasonable amount of travel for work. So quite often have to go to places I've not been before, places that are sometimes a fair distance away, and often places that aren't necessarily, big, easy to get to cities or offices in the centre of places. They're sometimes a little bit more in the middle of nowhere. So I've had to learn how to get there without trying to get in my car to do it.
Excellent, thank you. And next is someone who's a returning guest, and very much because we kind of ran out of time to talk about stuff last week. So Helen, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and why we've got you back on?
Thanks, Andy. Hi, everyone. I'm Helen. I also work for Sustrans, and I've recently relocated to a small town near Sheffield, just on the edge of the Peak District. Like Anna, I don't own a car, and the nearest kind of main train station with good links is about 10 miles away. So for me, my default mode of transport is the bike. And I like traveling by bike. I like kind of getting to know places and exploring new places, which is handy. I'm starting a new role with Sustrans in October with the North team, and there will be a lot of commuting to project sites all over South Yorkshire, some of which I imagine are going to be a bit hard to reach. So I'm hoping the skills that I've learned through kind of cycle touring and getting about will come in handy. And yeah, I'd like to share some tips with what I found that's been useful when I'm planning to cycle somewhere a bit hard to reach.
Excellent, thank you very much. And finally, I would like to welcome back to the show Amy with her very unique perspective on how you can get to what would seem leisure activities where you need a car without using a car. I'll leave it to you to explain that further.
Hello, I'm Amy, and yeah, I'm a bird watcher, but I don't actually own a car, so I do have access to one, but I've been trying more and more to see where I can get to without a car, mostly public transport. And then I've also been cycling since April, which has been really good as well.
Fabulous, thank you very much. And I'm going to come to Anna first. because you talked about how you get to quite challenging places to get to by public transport. Could you take us through a little bit of what your process is for trying to get to places that at first sight might be quite hard to reach by public transport?
So I think, not surprisingly, it's all in the planning, particularly if I've not been somewhere before, and I'm someone who likes to be quite organised. It makes me a bit calmer if I've thought about it all ahead. So I typically look, if it's a fairly long distance, I will look at the trains. So I'll use websites and apps like National Rail Inquiries and Trainline, just to look and see what trains might be available to get to near where I want to go. I also quite often pair that with Google Maps and use their public transport icon. So when you put in your start and finish place, often if you're a driver and you've only ever been using it to look how to drive places, it automatically goes to by car, but you can press the little bus icon and it will tell you about the public transport options. And I find that quite useful for letting me know what's available, particularly if it's in an area I don't know or I've not been to before. One tip that I have made the mistake of before is I've sort of been looking at the times and not realised that it automatically just sets the bus times to now, and you have to tell it the time that you want to go. It might be a few days in advance, and to plan for that. I don't leave it just with Google. I tend to get their suggestions of what local buses or public transport might be available, but I then tend to back that up by looking at the provider. So whoever the bus provider is, I will look on their website, look a bit more on the detail, because there you might be able to get the a map, an image of the route for a particular bus journey, or get more idea of the times and how it might differ, say, between term time and school time, you know, depending on when you're going or if you're going to go back several times. I also quite often tend to look at street view. So if I'm going to be changing between a train and a bus, for example, I quite like being able to know what to expect when I'm going to walk out of a train station. And if I, you know, come out, do I know I've come out the right side for the bus station? Does it look familiar to what I've seen on Google Street View? And I tend to sort of quite often jot a few things down if I want to, or do some screen grabs on my phone, so that as part of the journey I can do checks of what's the next part, you know, oh, I'm getting the bus and it's bus stand whatever at this time. So I quite often have lists of those down, and sometimes even put on there as a backup, and particularly if I'm going to an appointment where I definitely want to be on time, I might have a backup taxi number just in case things don't work out, so that I don't have to start Googling and finding local ones. I might do things like those in advance, and that sort of tends to make me more relaxed about the journey and feel like it's all going to sort of go smoothly. But probably one overarching thing that I think about when doing the planning is whether I want to be as fast as possible on my journey and get there as sort of just the shortest time, or whether it's more about sort of comfort and ease. And I think sometimes I'm quite happy doing train journeys which take a little bit longer but involve less changes, because I can sit and make use of that time. So I can actually work in that time, which might make my sort of working day shorter overall, even if travel makes up a larger part of it. So I quite like sort of thinking about how I want to sort of choose my route, whether it's speedy with more, a little bit more complicated or more changes, or just allow some time for it and make it a little bit easier for myself. So that's the sort of things that go through my mind when I'm trying to get somewhere that's a bit further away, a bit harder to reach, and somewhere I've not been before.
It's amazing. Amy, have you got anything that you can add to that in your efforts to get to remote birding places by public transport?
I guess it's similar to Anna, like the National Rail Inquiries is really useful, and I also use the Southwest Train app a lot because it's similar, and I guess based in Hampshire, that's like the main train company, and then Google Maps is usually quite helpful. Once or twice it claims it's failed to find a route because it doesn't realise you could walk from the bus stop to somewhere, which is a little bit odd, but usually it's quite good. And then I often also check the OS maps, because you might realise the bus stop or the train station is a bit of a trek from where you want to be, and you need to, it's nice if there's a good footpath instead of I Sleep Country Park is one where it's just a horrible road with nothing. So don't do that.
Yeah, been there. Fabulous. That's really good. And I'm going to come to Helen, because Helen, you're the expert in when you run out of public transport, how you get there under your own steam. So how do you go about when you've come up short on a public transport journey? How do you go about making that link by active travel? What's your process there?
Sure. Thanks, Andy. I think like a lot of the tips that Anna gave translate to trying to make a journey by bike or by walking. So it's all in the planning, which is true for a lot of things, right? And so, you know, when you're trying to get to know a place and plan a route, you need to look at maps. I love maps. I think they're great, really, to be able to explore and learn about a place and to be able to navigate yourself. It's really a feeling of freedom. It's quite freeing. So yeah, have a look at a map. I love a good OS map. If you're going to use it for walking and cycling, get the orange one, the 1x25. If you buy a paper map, you can also download it on your phone. And I think Andy's got a tip, haven't you, Andy, for how to get free use of OS? I don't know if you want to come in with that now.
Absolutely. I might as well jump in now. If you've ever wondered why you might want to use Bing mapping, here is your answer. Bing mapping has an ordnance survey layer which does 1 to 25,000 and 1 to 50,000 if you turn that on. So if you haven't got an ordnance survey subscription, but you'd quite like to see some ordnance survey mapping for somewhere and don't have the paid map, Bing has you covered. I can't believe I've just done that. I'm so sorry.
Oh, yeah, and so I mean, a good place to start as well is Google Maps, as with Anna. So you know, you can just use it in your web browser, put in your start point, your destination. Rather, like Anna said, remember to choose your mode, so it will default to what you normally use. So for me, it always defaults to cycling. One thing that I find Google Maps really useful for, again, like Anna, is the street view. So if, you know, as part of your journey, there's a main road, you might want to kind of pop the kind of person on the main road, and you're suddenly on the main road and you can see if there's a cycle path there or if it kind of looks like a big busy road. There's lots of other route planning tools that are quite useful. So it's all down to personal preference. I tend to use a variety of them for different things. So Commute is quite useful for exploring somewhere new. It's kind of user, so all of the routes that are put on there are put on by people who use Commute, and they tend to state how they cycle, for example. So if their route is for road cycling or for mountain biking. And so it's quite useful if you want to kind of, like Anna said, choose a more scenic route. You know, you might want to choose kind of touring, or if you don't mind going off road, you might want to choose a mountain bike. Obviously, that might be a longer route. And similarly with Commute, one thing that's great is that it will show you a map with the elevation and the different surface types. So that's quite useful when you're deciding on which roads to take. Another useful one is Strava. So that has something called heat maps. So you can, again, view by mode, walking or cycling, where other people who use Strava travel. So if you know, if you can see there's a bridleway, but you go onto Strava and it looks like hardly anyone uses that bridleway, so it's not very kind of coloured in the colour blue, then you probably know it's going to be pretty overgrown or impassable. So it's quite useful for seeing if a route looks viable if you haven't been there before. And most of these will have free versions as well as kind of paid versions. So you don't always have to pay to access the app. Try the free version, see which one you like, and if there's one you particularly like, you want other functionality, then you can get a subscription. And the thing that's, if you are going to kind of plan a route on one of these tools, then you need to decide how to follow your route. And so, like Anna, one thing that's quite a simple thing is just kind of put down some key kind of points on that route, landmarks, turning points. When I'm on my bike, I sometimes tape that on my top tube. So, I know when I get to, X village, turn left at the bus stop, and you've just got kind of a couple little key turning points. You can take a map, but not always practical. Or you can follow it on a device or on your phone, and that's my preference, really. And there's all sorts of advice I could give around devices. I don't know if I should go on to that. Yeah,
I was going to say, we may run out of time. Because we can disappear down a rabbit hole on that. Now this question is to all three of you. We've kind of covered getting there by public transport, and we've covered getting there by active travel. Are there any other modes that you've used to get to places that would otherwise appear to be quite hard to reach? And this is where I ask about things like hire bike schemes and car clubs and all those kinds of things, because I have a little bit of experience of those. I've been to a few places where they have cycle hire schemes, and they can be really good actually for bridging that gap where you don't want to take your own bike with you, but it gives you that opportunity to get to somewhere. I've yet to use the scooters. That's really embarrassing. It's just because I feel really old when I use one. But also there are things like car clubs. So if you are looking to get to places that are quite hard to reach, there is no shame in renting a car to do those journeys. Because if that's realistically the only way of doing it, then car is probably the one to do. And if you're renting one for that, it means you're not owning one. It's not sitting on your drive and all those kinds of things. It means you're only having it when you want it. But of the three, if you've got anything you would like to add on those kind of other ways of bridging that gap?
I guess the key thing is, ask a local. So if you're not sure how to get somewhere, if it looks like public transport doesn't work or sort of active travel options are not possible, then ask someone who lives there, and I'm sure they'll give you some insight, and they might know about a local hire scheme, like you said, Andy, and be able to give you some tips on sort of how to access it easily.
I think my other sort of modes that I've ended up with is probably more car share and taxi, but I think my general approach has been to try and make them as relatively small part of the journey as possible. So if I do end up needing to use them, I don't let that sort of make me think, oh, well, I just might as well use the car the whole way through. I think it's still worth looking at sort of how it fits in with the other modes. And obviously, if you can get a taxi at the end and it's a relatively short part of it, that's much better than driving the whole distance. But yeah, I don't think I've done anything. I'm trying to think if I've done any exciting sort of camel journeys or anything like that, but I'm afraid I haven't even got anything like that to add.
Fabulous. And kind of my final question before we go to the floor is, what are your tips for taking the stress out of getting to these places that might otherwise be quite hard to reach?
I mean, for me, with if you're kind of navigating a new route on a bike, remember, and as I said, I use a device, remember to have a backup. And also, if you're navigating on your phone, to save that route for offline use, because if it's a hard to reach place, it might not have internet. So it's quite simple to do. It's pretty obvious on an app if you're using that, how to save that for offline. And be prepared, so if you're leaving in the morning, make sure you've done all this the night before, packed your bike up, thought about what you're going to wear. Preparation definitely is key.
I think I would add something on top of what Helen said earlier, really, about speaking to people. So whoever you're going to see, they will know probably a good way to get there if you're going to visit someone. Speak to people on your journey, so be it sort of bus drivers, people at stations, other travellers, about sort of how they're travelling, or are they local, do they know what to do, even if it's just a matter of, where's this platform, or how do I get to the next, little part of the journey. And also one thing really, I guess, that applies to people who might have a workplace that they're trying to get to every day or regularly, that is a difficult to reach place. In which case, I think then it's probably a matter of, speak to your employers. You're probably not the only one who's struggling to get there. And you can let them know why you find it difficult, what you think might be changed to make it easier for you, what they might be able to do, or whether you need to collectively speak to sort of the local transport providers or local authorities and explain that there's a bit of a gap here for people who are making the journey like yours as well. So it's generally, I guess the other thing is about sort of communicating, asking for advice and giving feedback as well.
I also sometimes, especially for bus routes, if it's like a place I've never been to, I might set it up on Google Maps and then I can follow the journey, so I know when to get off. Although I guess you've got to be careful with battery lives and stuff like that, but that can work if you've forgotten to street map it, and so that you're not quite sure where you're getting off. And I guess for some long distance, I tend to try and avoid the London Underground because that's just really confusing. And if you can go kind of around it via the Midlands, it takes away a lot of stress and it's much more simple.
I do exactly the same trick on the bus, so keeping an eye on it on Google Maps where I am, where I'm coming up to. But I think your point about be careful about battery life is good as well. So sometimes when I'm doing days where I'm traveling around a bit and my phone's quite a key part of it, obviously make sure it's charged up at the beginning of the day, but I sometimes try and put it on low battery or low brightness or something like that, so that I know, even though I'm going to be using it lots and lots, hopefully it will sort of stay great for the whole of the day.
Yeah, and it's probably worth that a lot of buses and trains now, you can plug your phone in and charge it while you're on the journey. So it's kind of battery neutral following your journey whilst you're on there, which can be a real advantage. I'm going to throw you all a curveball now, because having said I was going to go to Amber, I'm going to throw you a question out of left field. We've talked a lot about places being hard to get to spatially, so in terms of physically hard to get to. Have you any experience of places that seem like they're easy to get to, but if you're going at an odd time of day or an odd day of the week, that's caused issues? And if you have experienced that, have you got round it?
I've noticed buses in particular can be quite annoying. Like, I've been trying to see where in Hampshire I can get to for bird watching, and I noticed that Martin Down, which is right on the edge of Hampshire near Salisbury, you can get there, but only on weekdays. So for that, I guess you have to book the time off and plan it that way. And evenings and weekends are particularly annoying, even just travelling within Fareham. I was just looking this morning about going down to the coast, and you can't do that in the evening by bus. It just, yeah, it's really silly because it's so built up and everything, but no. So I guess for them, if it's local, you can maybe walk or cycle if you feel comfortable doing that, and then work out where the most pleasant route is, like if there is some nice footpaths instead, or if you can maybe just wait until a day when it, or a time when it is possible, if that is possible to do.
I think just adding to Amy's last point there, I am sometimes quite selfish, particularly if I'm organising to meet someone who I know typically drives and won't think about things like public transport or how to get there, by walking or cycling. So sometimes I tend to try and be a bit proactive, and I'm the one to suggest the day or the time, and do it in a way that I know that the public transport might be running at that time. Or, for example, some places I try to get to, the buses only run once an hour or once every 2 hours. So I will look what time they're due to arrive. And even if it's a bit of an unusual time, I might ask someone if they could meet me at 1:15 rather than 1 or 1:30, just to sort of preempts that, really. So I do sometimes sort of look ahead and try and, where possible, work my journey around what's available.
Got anything you want to add to that, Helen, or shall we go to questions?
I guess the only other thing, and it happens not particularly on a particular time of the day or day, but you might get a diversion. And quite often if I'm on my bike and I see a diversion sign, I think, oh, I'll be able to get around that. And you ride on, and then suddenly you get to a point and the bridge is like closed and you can't get across, and you've got to double back and find a way through. And that's happened to me quite a few times. So just knowing how to deal with that on the ground. So getting familiar with maps, and they're great, aren't they? You kind of, once you start looking at maps and exploring, I think it just gives you so much freedom. It's quite liberating, and so yeah, that's kind of my advice. Get to learn how to use maps, and especially how to use them when you're out and about to kind of reroute if you're cycling in particular.
Excellent, thank you. Amber, have we got any questions?
So we've got a question probably aimed at Amy, because she has the option of having a car. Has there been any points where you've kind of given up and driven, and what's driven you to drive?
I guess in the past I have, but this year I've tried a lot harder not to. And it's been where I've checked all the different public transport options and concluded that there isn't really anything, and the best option really is just to drive, annoyingly. So I guess a few years ago I went up to volunteer up in Lincolnshire at Frampton Marsh, and you're staying in this farmhouse literally in the middle of nowhere, and there isn't a bus, and you're miles from the train station. So I did give up and borrow the car and take it, but I think that those few months made me hate driving more. So now I try a lot harder not to drive, or I might arrange a lift instead, see if there are other local bird watchers who want to go to the same place, and then at least you've got a group so you can share the fuel costs, and that makes it nicer than just you driving around.
Absolutely. I guess another one would be, have any of you used local micromobility? If so, what did you think of it?
This is where I come across as a total technophobe. The problem I have, micromobility is great, but it would be really nice if I didn't have to install an entirely new app on my phone every time I wanted to do one, and they all operate in slightly different ways. It's not a thing that you can do in a new area off the cuff, and it comes back to what Anna and Amy and Helen have been saying. Planning really helps in this. So if you're somewhere that you are quite often, micromobility is great because you're just going to go and yeah, brilliant, off you go. But if it's somewhere I've never been, and I recently went to Leicester for an event where they've got a bike hire scheme there, and it's great, but it took me about 45 minutes to realize that my phone was too old to work their app. And at that point, I was so check before you go. But once you've got it installed, they're really good. I really like them.
Brilliant. So quite different one is, how do you spice up your journey if it's getting a bit boring or the same?
I guess one thing I like doing is using sleeper trains. I think that adds quite a lot, and then you end up doing most of the travel at night, so then you've got the whole day to have fun and explore. And also, we were chatting before we went live about ferries. They're really fun, and if you're in like going to an island or something, they can, or even in Hampshire, you can like cut corners off with ferries. So that adds quite a lot of fun, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I make no secret that I'm a big fan of boat travel, and particularly in South Hampshire, where you can avoid going in from all the headlands by just hopping across the end and, you know, going across Titchfield and you know, across Gosport and then across to Hayling Island. You can just kind of daisy chain your way across, and it's about half the distance of driving. You can just go in a straight line along by boat. But I think boats are a great way to make what might otherwise be a relatively ordinary journey feel like an adventure.
I quite like to add in a bit of sightseeing almost. So I think this has probably come from holidays around the UK, where I'm always keen to make sure the day you spend traveling feels like a day's holiday. It doesn't feel like just a day traveling. And so you add things into it so that you visit new places as part of it. So I guess I think I've started adding that into some of my other sort of leisure and sometimes even work travel, that if you say, sometimes I might be getting a train with my bike and then cycling the other end, and I've left a reasonable amount of time to cycle because I don't know where I'm going. But say I'm getting close to my destination, I would look sort of before I go, is there anywhere relatively near my destination where if I'm there a bit early, I can go and sit somewhere nice, or see a nice, you know, old church or whatever it may be, or even just somewhere nice and sort of quiet or warm and cozy to sit and check my emails on my phone or something like that. So sort of adding in little detours, sightseeing, or at least sort of buffer time somewhere nice to go to break the journey up a bit.
Brilliant. We've got one from the chat from Claire. She's just said, how can we encourage other forms of travel on the work commute?
Oh, that's the best question ever. Anna, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think I'd probably come a bit back to what I said earlier, really, and I guess it brings it back to my journey as well, is I think if you can feedback to your colleagues and to your employers about what you think's needed to make it easier for you and your colleagues to travel in ways other than by car, then that's really useful, so that they know what they need to do, and also let them know this is important to you. This is something that makes a difference to you and probably to other people that they're trying to recruit for the business. I think as when employers understand that makes a difference. So doing that. And I guess generally anything we can do to make, you know, to encourage providers to have the bus services there and the cycle infrastructure and that type of thing. But they're all quite big jobs.
I mean, I think some of the time it comes back to how you can't be what you can't see. And it's really important that if you are someone who does travel sustainably to places that appear hard to reach, that you're doing it really obviously. And if you are someone who is interested in trying it, there will be someone at your workplace who is probably doing it already, and speak to them, because they will know all the ins and outs and the ways of doing it. And in terms of what workplaces can do, really harnessing those people who are doing it now. And we did a thing years ago called Bosses on Bikes, where we just did a showcase of someone who says, I ride to work because, and here's how I get there. And just showing people it's possible, because a lot of the time it is, I mean, it's not always possible, but it is often possible. It takes quite a lot of thought and planning and preparation. And if you can get someone else to help you with that, it suddenly becomes much more easy. And if you can see someone like you doing it, then it feels much more realistic. But that's my personal soapbox on this one. Helen and Amy, have you got any thoughts on this one?
I think you've covered a lot of it off there, Andy. I think the Bosses on Bikes campaign is great. You know, good leadership. You know, if you're someone influential in the business, show that it can be done. But you know, as Anna said, sometimes, you know, if there's no cycle provision, or you know, it's not obvious how to get into the building, if you've got a bike where you can leave your bike, just as employers, just kind of making that information available to your employees, and doing that as part of the induction, right? Kind of normalizing it, kind of making it kind of part of what you advise your employees about, and kind of, you know, support them with as well. So, you know, business travel, cars often get paid, people driving their cars often get paid a mileage. Well, reward people for choosing to cycle somewhere by paying a bike mileage. There's lots of simple things that you can do, and I know My Journey has got lots of advice and guidance and resources that you're happy to share with businesses that are looking to support their staff to travel actively.
And finally, shout about it. If you are doing this, put it all over your socials, because if people can't see you doing it, it might as well not. I mean, it's not because it's not on Strava, it hasn't happened, but if people see you doing it on your socials, and not in a, I'm brilliant, but just in a, today on my commute, I did this, it normalizes it and makes it look like a thing that is realistic. That is just about all we got time for. We've had quite a lot today. We've crammed quite a lot in. We have also overrun. So thank you very much to Anna and to Helen and to Amy. As ever, your advice is fabulous and your time is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for coming on today. Canny Commuting is a My Journey Hampshire production and is brought to you in association with Sustrans. It is funded by National Highways. Today is episode 15, and this is the point where I normally talk about what we're going to do next week, but episode 15 is the last of this series. If you would like to see this or any of the previous 14 episodes, they are available on our YouTube channel, which is at bit.ly/Canny episodes, or whatever what it says below me if you're watching us on YouTube in a moment. We will be back here in the new year with any luck, but until then, have a fabulous week, look after yourselves and enjoy Canny Commuting. Goodbye.